Welcome back to another episode of the Main Quest podcast. This is, of course, the #1 retro gaming podcast that has enough fuel and fire to give you what you desire. As always, I am your host, Keith, and this is episode 104, all on Virtua Racing Deluxe. If you would like to get more Main Quest, you can head on over to patreon.com/the Main Quest, where you'll find bonus episode on games like Advance Wars, the Earthbound Halloween Hack, or even another racing game, Need for Speed 3: Hot Pursuit. You'll also get access to current issues of a review, which are written reviews stylized as the old gaming magazines that we read as kids. You'll also be able to get the exclusive side series Launch Protocol, which finds me ranking launch games across 20 consoles and other things that I can't remember off the top of my head. Those are the big ones. That's what you get. You'll also get episodes a week early, uncensored, uncut, and ad-free. You might have noticed that there were no ads during Listener Request Month, which I abstained from because it's really all about you guys and celebrating the show's existence. But the ads are back, baby. Prepare your index fingers or your thumbs, or whatever appendages you use to skip, 15 seconds ahead. You don't need to tell me what you use. I don't need to know. And of course, if you donate to the Patreon, 100% of the funds go directly to keeping this thing on the internet. But there's no pressure. I know things are tight for a lot of people right now. It's only if you can. And if you want to support the show, and you can't do it financially or don't want to do it financially, there are other ways, like rating and reviewing the Main Quest wherever you're currently listening to it. And if you aren't able to do so because some apps be like that, spread the word. Tell a friend. Share some stuff on social media. You got to keep this airship flying, so to speak, across those vast blue skies of SEO. Speaking of blue skies, we have a Sega game to talk about. And I'm also going to apologize up front here. I'm currently battling something. I don't know what kind of sickness I currently have, so bear with me. We'll get through this. I was going to weigh in on all the Switch 2 stuff, but on top of me not feeling very well and just in general not caring, so I figure we can just get a grip on the steering wheel of this episode and focus on the road ahead. Because today we're talking about Virtua Racing Deluxe. Sega Blue Sky. That's a crayon color if I've ever heard of it. If it's not a crayon color, Crayola needs to get on that. Sega Blue Sky. Anyway, I'd love to start this episode out with my previous experience with Virtua Racing Deluxe. I would like to, so I will. That's what I do every episode. So the first time I played the game was most likely at a Chuck E. Cheese when I was 8 or 9 years old. My local arcade didn't have the room for something as large as a Virtua Racing cabinet. The one that I played specifically was the dual seat sit-down cabinet. So considering the size of that thing, I had to have played it at a chain arcade like Chuck E. Cheese or something, which is ironic because Chuck E. Cheese being born out of Atari, having a Sega game. It's funny how that stuff works out. But Virtua Racing, it was intense. There wasn't really anything like it. There were racing arcade games, of course, prior to that, but they were all 2D. Now, you could argue there was one other 3D racing game that Namco released, which was kind of the impetus for Virtua Racing. but I don't know if that had as much distribution as Virtua Racing did, and I certainly never saw it here, so I don't know what the popularity of that was overall. My point being, though, this was incredibly new tech, and sitting down at one of the cabinets and being fully immersed in the environment, being a kid and holding onto the wheel and using the gas pedal, it was as close to driving an actual race car as you could get. Like, immersive isn't even really a word for it. Like, it was like intoxicating, which is suitable since a DUI is basically a rite of passage in Wisconsin. It was incredible. Just like the sense of speed, the pavement on the road, like blurring underneath the car, the trees and the signage just like disappearing as fast as they appeared, which has to do with draw distance issues. But zigzagging like underneath bridges and roads, like just the sense of scope was amazing back then. And to tell you the truth, I wasn't really any good at the game. In fact, I'm not that great at racing games when they're in the arcades. Like the way the steering wheels always jerk around in a lot of those cabinets, I think that sucks. I guess that's not the kind of immersion that I want. I want the kind of immersion that like leads me to getting first place, like being a winner. And because Virtual Racing wasn't something I could play at my local arcade, it made me want to play it even more. So when my parents would take me to those larger arcades, I would always try and track it down and get a few laps in. I think the lack of availability made me more fond of it because it just felt that much more special. And then fast forward a year or two, and I now have a 32X. Virtua Racing Deluxe was one of the 2 or 3 games that launched with that Genesis add-on, and I was even more impressed that the game that I had been obsessed with is now in my house. It's on my TV. I can play it whenever I want. Now, of course, this wasn't the first arcade port that I owned. I mean, if you go back and listen to my NES coverage from a few years back, like 25% of my NES library were arcade ports. Only difference is this is Sega, and they know how to port arcade games. And this one's a little more special than some other games, because this is one of the very few ways that I could actually bond with my dad. He's never had any interest in basically anything I say or do, especially when it comes to video games. But he's what do you call him? A gearhead? He likes cars. He used to work on cars all the time. He still watches NASCAR and F1 races. And I know for him, seeing virtual racing on our TV blew his mind, and it blew my mind as well. The sounds, the graphics, and the gameplay, it was basically like a 1-to-1 recreation of what I had been playing in the arcade. I even felt like it handled better than the arcade game, though that probably isn't the case. I don't know, there's something about the D-pad that just felt more natural than a steering wheel to me, but again, I was 8 years old, so it's not like using a steering wheel came naturally to me. A D-pad did, though. So, yeah, coming into this episode, I was excited to replay this game. I have very fond memories of it, as you can tell, but before I give myself a reality check, let me tell you how virtual racing came to be. Virtua Racing is a racing game. Can you believe it? Developed by Sega AM2 and published by Sega. I'm actually shocked that I'm this far into my Sega documentation and I haven't brought up AM2 yet. It's even more surprising that this is the last time I bring them up. Well, until I start until I start talking about my Saturn library, since that is that's where I played a majority of their games. And so if you're a long-time listener, and you've probably heard me talk about Nintendo EAD over and over and over again, AM2 is Sega of Japan's parallel to that. Prior to them being Amusement Machine 2, which is what that stands for, they were just simply R&D 8 and released games like Outrun and Hang On. AM2's main focus was creating arcade games and later responsible for porting those arcade games to the Genesis and the Saturn. Now, a few minutes ago, I passively mentioned that Namco in their game, which was called Winning Run, that came out in 1988, Namco's System 21 board was capable of producing like these very early 3D games with like rudimentary polygons. And they were kind of like encroaching on Sega's bottom line. And Atari wasn't far behind Namco either. Like they were also starting to develop 3D arcade games pretty late in the 80s. But, it's Atari. Can't take them seriously. So while Sega of Japan was fighting off NEC in the console space at home, building a strategy, to fight Nintendo here in the West, they needed a battle plan to edge out Namco in the arcades, which is why they assembled AM2. And this was headed by legendary game designer and programmer Yu Suzuki. And once AM2 was settled, once they started making games, arcades just were never the same. I said earlier that it didn't feel like there was anything out there quite like Virtua Racing. And when you think about it, yeah, there were comparable games after it, but I don't think AM2 gets enough credit for being at the forefront and utilizing cutting-edge tech that set the foundation not only for arcade games from here on out, but for what they were able to do on the Saturn and the Dreamcast. AM2 are the pioneers of Sega, basically creating for what I think is like, the golden age of Sega. I gotta be careful how I use the term golden age. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. People are gonna think this entire podcast was made by a robot. Because apparently AI loves the term golden age when referring to retro games. Shout out to Omi. Anyway, I think we should be thankful that Namco and Sega had beef. Because as far as racing and fighting games go, boy, we are eating that beef. Like that's some good beef, man. Both companies were like constantly pushing boundaries and like outdoing one another. And in any other circumstance, you would think that like one of them would and like the balance would shift. But like, no, like both Namco and AM2 were like smelting gold bricks in their respective forge. The stuff they were putting out was just so consistently good on both ends. And all of this started, 3 years prior. Like it took 3 years for Yu Suzuki and the rest of AM2 to create that Model 1 board that would become Namco's competitor. As the years went on, the company would eventually create its successor, of course, the Model 2 and the Model 3. Shortly after AM2 was established, of course, they needed people to make video games. So they hired now Sega rockstar Toshihiro Nagoshi. Virtua Racing was his debut game. If you're not familiar with Nagoshi's line of work, maybe you've heard of Virtua Fighter. Maybe you've heard of Shenmue or Super Monkey Ball. F-Zero GX. You need another one? Bayonetta. Sonic Colors. Sonic Mania. How about a couple more here? We got Sakura Wars. Valkyria Chronicle. Oh, right. Yeah. How can I ever forget? The entire Yakuza series. And like seriously, if you look up pictures of Toshihiro Nagoshi, he legitimately looks like a rock star. It's your move, Nomura. And Nagoshi's claim to fame here, his main contribution for Virtua Racing, are the camera angles. This game established the zoom out, POV, and skycam angles that many modern racing games are known to have. This mechanic also got Sega into a bit of trouble when they tried to patent this idea, which they got away with for a while until Sony and Nintendo took them to court, and Sega subsequently got the patent revoked. So Virtua Racing, or BV, as it was known in its prototype phase, debuted in the summer of 1992 at Shibuya Gold in Japan. It was later released in arcades around the world that fall. And of course, the reason why I'm here today, it got ports. Most surprising, it got a port to the Genesis in March 1994. And if you think your sweet little Mario Kart is too expensive, Virtua Racing for the Genesis was $100 in 1994 money. So that's around $220 in 2025 money. Imagine if Mario Kart was actually that expensive. I mean, listen, Mario Kart is expensive, but the prices of games have not scaled with the economy, and I think we should be thankful for that. But why was Virtua Racing $100 in 1994? Well, the Genesis can't handle polygons. It doesn't even come close to producing the kind of graphics that Virtua Racing was able to do in arcades. So Sega developed the Sega Virtual Processor, or the SVP chip, and slapped that baby right into every copy of Virtua Racing so it could run on the Genesis. If you're a patron, I did put out a episode on Star Fox a few years back where I talked about the FX chip, because Nintendo did the exact same thing with some of their Super Nintendo games. Only difference is, Nintendo half-heartedly supported the FX chip, and they made maybe like, I don't know, a dozen games with that thing, maybe less. Virtua Racing was the only game Sega made using the SVP chip, because it was not only too expensive to produce, but the games are also too expensive for consumers. The only reason why they ported the game to the Genesis in the first place is because, well, the console was almost 7 years old, and Sega really had no idea if there was going to be a Genesis successor at all. Like, they had no idea. The company had no idea what they were doing. You know, the Genesis was selling well here in the West, and in Japan, they had plans for things, future secret things, like 2 canceled consoles, the 32X, and then a failed console in the Saturn. So, I don't know, may as well put out the thing on the Genesis and squeeze whatever blood is left in that stone. And speaking of the 32X, which is the version I played, it was released in November 1994 in the US and got a worldwide release the following month. Virtua Racing was also ported to the Sega Saturn, PlayStation 2, and the Nintendo Switch. Now, the Saturn version of Virtua Racing is actually completely different from any other version of the game. It was outsourced to Time Warner, of all people, and apparently Sega withheld the source code from them. So they basically had to make the game from scratch, and yeah, it shows. Aside from the Genesis port, the Saturn game is probably the worst version that you can play. Makes you wonder why Sega even bothered at all porting it to the Saturn. Now, I did play the version that is available on the Switch, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But for now, review scores for context. Next Generation gave it a 3 out of 5. Edge Magazine, 8 out of 10. Hyper, shout out to my Aussies, Hyper Magazine, gave it an 82%. And Computer and Video Games gave it a 92. In 1994, video games gave Virtua Racing Deluxe the second best 32X game, which is amazing when you consider 70% of the 32X library launched in 1994. Stiff competition. And in 2015, IGN cited it as the third most influential racing game of all time, right between its older brother Outrun, which is going to be a movie now, by the way, and Gran Turismo, which is also another racing movie. There you go. Virtua Racing, coming to a theater near you. Look out. Here it comes. Thank you all for being here. I apologize for any inconvenience this might have caused. So let's just cut to the point. As the new CGO, I have noticed the company's growth has stagnated. Our current profits are, to put it simply, not sufficient for what I envision.
Chris, I grow weary of this.
Apologies, President Wesker. And to clarify, with all due respect, my name is Keith.
Only those fit for survival will be allowed to carry their genes into a new age.
Right. Yeah, so...
Chris!
These figures represent our future capital, and as you know, the market can be unpredictable.
Chris!
Me? Yeah? Yes, Mr. President.
Let me clarify something for you, Chris. 7 minutes is all I can spare to play with you.
Okay. Got it. And again, with all due respect, my name is Keith.
Poor deluded Chris. How you so love your precious self-righteousness.
Well, risk is an essential part of growth, and this is why I present to the board the Main Quest Podcast merch store.
Pathetic. Only a handful of humans truly matter. Everyone else is just so much chaff.
Again, all due respect, sir. Perhaps we can use this opportunity to reach out to a different generation with t-shirt designs that embody the podcast, align with its values, and just look cool.
You will give me an egg.
We won't be selling any food on the merch store, though the markup on eggs is rather profitable these days. We want to dominate the marketplace. What is it you always say? Complete, global, saturation?
Affirmative.
So instead of focusing on the food sector, let's focus on uniquely designed stickers, hats, hoodies, and tanks. The potential here is vast. The more people that purchase something from the Main Quest merch store, the more people become aware of the podcast, and the buyer gets something in return, knowing they're supporting an indie podcast and designer. It is a statement of power, Mr. Wesker.
Impressive. Good work. You will give me a can of first aid spray.
With all due respect, Mr. Wesker, maybe you should go ahead and check out tpublic.com/user/the Main Quest podcast. Or just visit the link in the show notes. You won't find any eggs or first aid spray, but there will be something there for everybody.
Good teamwork. It was in your best interest to assist me.
I desperately want to toss a lozenge in my mouth right now because my throat is killing me. This episode is gonna sound terrible, but it's gonna sound even more terrible if you lozenge clacking around my mouth while I talk. This sucks. Retro Recollections. What do you guys have to say about Virtua Racing? It is time for Retro Recollections, and if you would like to contribute to future segments, all you have to do is follow the show on social media, the social media platform of your choice, of course, or you can come hang out in the public Discord. All those links are in the show notes, and of course, I begin with the comments from Discord, and we begin with Chris Copleen from the Retro Hangover podcast. He says, "It sucks." And then immediately afterwards, we have Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon, from Fun and Games and Reignite podcasts, simply stating, seconded. We're going to get into it. A little heavy-handed there. I disagree. Lethco, adding a little bit more levity to the Retro Recollections today. He says, oh, and Lethco, of course, runs the wonderful Afterglow podcast. He says, it was an interesting Genesis release when they packed in SH2 chip to make it work, later just packing a couple SH2 chips in the 32X itself. But it was insanely priced for a slow and clunky racing game that I never understood the appeal of. A great example of a game that was 3D before 3D was ready. I do think 3D was ready, it just was not ready for the Genesis. yeah, I mean, I didn't play the Genesis port of this game, though I did see some videos of it, and that was enough. That was simply enough. Thank you, Sega. So let's talk about my current experience with Virtua Racing, and of course, we begin every breakdown with the story and plot. So let's move on to gameplay. At its core, Virtua Racing Deluxe is a bare-bones arcade racer. Even with additional cars and tracks, this version of the game does just enough to actually feel like a fully realized game over the arcade original. And one of the things I didn't mention earlier is that the game actually started off as a tech demo. The original game started as a tech demo for that Model 1 board, and Sega decided just to make a game out of it. So the original game only has one Formula 1 type vehicle and 3 tracks, which are basically easy, medium, and hard. They have names, Big Forest, Bay Bridge, and Acropolis, respectively. The 32X port has all of these things, in addition to a stock car and a prototype sports car, culminating in 3 vehicle choices, as well as 2 additional racetracks, Highland and Sand Park. Now, as far as I can tell, this additional content is what sets the 32X version apart from every other version of the game. And I appreciate that because the game it's still not very feature rich. It's not like you can sit there and choose the color of your cars, and there's no time of day system, there's no mirror mode or anything like that. You start the game, you launch in the main menu, select your car and course, and you go. The only other mode is a time attack mode, which, I mean, if that's your thing, great. I'm not a time chaser. It's there if you want it, and you can get the satisfaction of knowing that you're getting better at the game than your friends. But personally, those kind of modes don't really do anything for me, but it's in here. And speaking of time, every track is segmented into time zones. Every race starts you off at about 70 seconds, and with every checkpoint you gain another 10 seconds. Which is most arcade racers to this day, they still incorporate some sort of checkpointing system in their design. And I think it works fine with this version of Virtua Racing. But of course, in the arcade version, which I guess this podcast isn't about, but I think the reason why I don't like arcade racers in the arcades so much is that this system was the bane of my existence because it felt like I was more or less racing against the clock instead of racing against my opponents. And to some extent, that still kind of feels like the case here. But this being a console port, it's just easy to jump back into the game after running out of time that I didn't really mind it that much. The only thing that was really truly frustrating is just how much I sucked at the game. I got better over time. I came back to this many, many times. But I could only place first in maybe 2 of the tracks. All the other ones I would either time out in or either get 3rd or 4th place. And though I was getting frustrated at the game for not giving me enough time to catch up or to finish the race, the reality is I was probably never even good enough to catch up to any of the opponents in the first place, which leads me, I guess, to my biggest complaint about the game is the computer opponents, who are way too perfect. And perfection and mastery of the tracks is basically the name of the game here. If you make one mistake, your entire race is over. You may as well just start over because you're not catching up. And if you're doing well, if you're actually competitive enough and you're amongst the other drivers, that's probably one of the worst situations you could be in, because if you happen to hit one of them, your car will comically spin out of control while the other cars just jet away completely unaffected. The same thing happens if you drive over the runoff areas like grass or dirt. And when I say your car comically spins out, I mean it does triple vault handspring somersaults and goes up for a cup of coffee before it regains its traction on the road. And if you think that's some sort of over dramatic, like over animated description of how the crash outs happen, I mean, just wait until we get to Daytona, USA, because in that game, it's even worse. And because the crash out is so over dramatic, you're also going to lose quite a bit of time during the crash and then some just getting back up to speed again, all the while completely losing rank. Virtua Racing demands perfection. You need to learn every turn and curve of the track to know when you have to slow down or pump the gas to gain an extra boost of speed. There is a subtle slipstream mechanic that you can utilize to help pass other vehicles on the road, but I didn't find that this was a mandatory mechanic that you needed to interact with if you're already at the point in which you're good enough to even catch up to anybody at all. But it is cool that AM2 thought to even incorporate something so crucial that would become so crucial in later racing games into something this rudimentary. And sure, like, yeah, I was mad. I was mad while I was playing this. And sure, I was also maybe Chris Copleen at first. It was like, man, this sucks. But then I just got better. Even the other tracks I wasn't placing first in, I was getting better. So while I do think the game could have been way more forgiving when it came to like rebounding after a crash, or even just not being that dramatic when running into another driver, the game did feel good to play. And aside from the middle of my left thumb getting a little sore because you do have to control the car with the D-pad, Virtua Racing actually holds up really well in regards to how the vehicle's control. The F1 car was a little too loose for my liking, and the handling on the prototype, the sports car, felt a little out of control because it is the fastest car in the game. So I really felt like the traditional stock car was the best way to go. There really isn't any drifting in Virtual Racing, but when the stock car takes a sharp turn, it almost feels like it handles them in kind of like a pseudo drift. And so it just feels way better to control than any of the other vehicles. So overall, there are some things I do not like about this game, only because they are things that just come from the fact that this is an arcade game. And I can't fault it for that. This port of Virtual Racing is incredibly faithful to the arcade game, to a fault. But this being 1994, this is exactly what I mentioned earlier. Like, this was magical. To play something that was 1-to-1 with the arcades at home was insane. And I felt that way again playing it for the show. I'm very surprised how good this felt to come back to after all this time. Heading on over to the presentation now, our final category of the podcast. Starting with the visual presentation. Initially, I was like, wow, this is a little rough. It is literally an entire game made up of flat shaded polygons. And a little bit of trivia, dear listener. This was the first game ever to use polygonal models to represent people. But the more I played it, and the more I saw of the other tracks, the more I began to appreciate the design aesthetics behind this game. It actually doesn't look as dated as maybe it would have like 15 years ago. Like, this type of flat shaded like design ethos has resurfaced in a lot of indie games in the past 5 years. And I think because of that, this almost looks like a modern retro like video game. Except this is like the genuine article. It doesn't have to feign its design because it is what indie devs are currently ripping off. And if you're coming here for hot takes, I guess this is the hot take you're looking for. I think Virtua Racing looks better than Mario Kart 64. In fact, I think Virtua Racing looks better than most N64 games because there are no stretched out or blurry textures attached to these polygons. So, if you can't tell, I mean, I do love how Virtua Racing looks. And of course, you get that big blue Sega sky that I talked about earlier. Bay Bridge is a gorgeous track. They're all gorgeous, and they're all incredibly distinct, surprisingly. Like, there's a great sense of scale as you zoom in and out around overpasses or over bridges. And when you nail a turn and come out of it at full speed, I mean, the game feels fast. Like, going back to gameplay, it really feels good when you really learn how to play it and meet it on its terms. And I think the simple visuals really enhance the experience. Periodically, there's like a little burst of flames that come out of the exhaust that looks really charming because, again, it's just a bunch of orange polygons. And I think there's something really cool to that. Sadly, I think the music and sound effects are lacking. I mean, there's barely any music in this game to speak of. I don't know what the decision was not to just have a track playing in the background. I don't know what they were thinking here. Maybe hardware limitations, perhaps. But the music that is in here, it's good. Every time you hit a checkpoint, a fanfare will play. And if you're good enough, you could hit another checkpoint and kind of keep that celebration going. But that's all you really get here. And I just wish there was more of it. And the sound effects are fine by themselves. You don't get a ton here outside of the constant humming of your engine, which did start to get on my nerves a little bit with the lack of music that would otherwise probably drown it out. You also get some voice samples here. I love the guy at the beginning of the game who yells, Virtua Racing! At the beginning of the game. That was a horrible impression. I'm just going to put the real clip in here.
Virtua Racing!
For some reason, every time I heard it, it just reminded me of Will Ferrell.
Virtua Racing!
It sounds like Will Ferrell to me.
Virtua Racing!
I'll let you be the judge. So, as far as presentation goes, I kind of feel the same way about gameplay and presentation. It's like, I more or less love it, but there are like some decisions that were made that I'm not completely down with, but it didn't distract from my overall enjoyment of it. So I think I'm going to call it here. My voice is killing me right now. Sure, it's killing you. Would I recommend checking out Virtua Racing Deluxe? And I think I'm going to say no. Maybe. I'll tell you why I hesitate to say yes. And that's because even though this is the granddaddy of modern racing games, it certainly plays like a granddaddy. You really have to earn the satisfaction this game gives you once you've bent over and met it on its own terms. You don't have to do that now with a lot of modern racing games. Like, when you jump into a new racing game, everything just feels intuitive. Virtua Racing doesn't feel intuitive because though it has a lot of the accoutrement racing games have now, in which they were very deliberate, those mechanics are antiquated in comparison. And I didn't mention pit stops. There are pit stops in this game, and I think the more damage your car takes, the worse it performs, but I couldn't tell because if I took damage, I just restarted the race, and making a pit stop would waste even more time than just spinning out. But hey, there's pit stops. The immersion is in there. And here's the thing. If you pick up Virtua Racing, Arcade or 32X, don't play the Genesis version. Whatever you do, do not perform self-harm. But if you do pick up one of these versions, I think you'll actually be pretty surprised. I don't agree with Matt or Chris in the retro recollections. And I don't know, perhaps they had more detailed complaints that they didn't vocalize, but I don't think Virtua Racing sucks, and I do not think it's a bad game. But again, I mean, hey, we're speaking to the casuals out here, would I recommend it to the average person? And I'm not sure that I would. I think I would go like a light not recommend here. It is simple to pick up and play, but it's very, very tough to master. Now, with that said, the Sega Ages port is perfect. Almost perfect. It is a direct remake of the arcade version, which means it does not have the additional content that the 32X version has, which means you only get one car and the 3 tracks. Weird decision, because those extra tracks are very good. I don't know why they didn't include those, but the Sega Ages version, Nintendo Switch version of Virtua Racing does have modern controls. It does control like a modern arcade racer. It runs at 60 frames per second, and they added extra lighting and reflections that make the game look even more phenomenal than I think it already did. So I would definitely recommend checking out the Sega Ages version of Virtua Racing. Like, that is a 10 out of 10 game right there. But the 32X version, I think the love has to be built into it. I think you have to have the nostalgia there to go back to it. Also, if I may recommend again, not for the first time because it was on my Game of the Year list in 2020, Hot Shot Racing. Hot Shot Racing is an amazing AM2 knockoff racing game made by Sumo Digital and Lucky Mountain. It has that same polygonal Sega Blue Sky look to it, with all like the modern niceties that you would want from a modern racing game. Like tons of great modes in that game as well. Hot Shot Racing, go check it out. But that's it. I'm going to get out of here. This episode was a little longer than I thought it would be, considering I had no story to talk about. Next time on the program, I'm heading back to the mean streets of New York City. And I'm finally going to sit down and talk to my fellow Solid Boys co-host, Chris Dominguez, in his debut main feed episode. Finally. It's overdue. And we're going to talk about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Hyperstone Heist. So until then, take care of yourselves and always remember, it's okay to like a video game.
Virtua